What you are seeing in the headlines right now is being framed as a failed negotiation. That framing is incomplete. It suggests a momentary breakdown, a diplomatic stumble that could be corrected with another meeting, another mediator, another round of concessions. But that interpretation misses the structural reality underneath. This was not a negotiation that collapsed. It was a negotiation that revealed, with unusual clarity, the limits of what either side is currently willing or able to concede. Here is what matters. After 21 hours of direct and mediated engagement, the United States and Iran did not miscommunicate. They did not run out of time. They did not walk away over a minor procedural dispute. They reached the edge of their strategic red lines and stopped. The immediate facts are now well established. The talks, held in Pakistan under heavy security and significant diplomatic investment, ended without agreement. U.S. Vice President JD Vance departed, stating that no deal had been reached, emphasizing that the outcome would ultimately harm Iran more than the United States. On the Iranian side, Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi publicly criticized the U.S. approach, arguing that Washington attempted to extract through negotiations what it had failed to achieve through military pressure. Iran's parliamentary leadership reinforced this position, stating that the United States had failed to build sufficient trust. Behind those public statements, the core disputes were narrow but fundamental. The United States demanded the immediate and unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to all maritime traffic. Iran refused, insisting that full reopening would only come as part of a permanent peace agreement. At the same time, Washington sought limits on Iran's nuclear program, including the relinquishment of enriched uranium stockpiles. Tehran rejected that outright. In return, Iran sought economic relief, including the unfreezing of assets, which the United States was unwilling to provide without concrete concessions. After nearly a full day of negotiations, neither side moved enough on either issue. The result was not a dramatic collapse, but a controlled disengagement. The ceasefire remains in place. Technical discussions are expected to continue. A final and best offer has reportedly been left on the table. No bridges were burned, but none were crossed. This is where the analysis becomes critical, because none of this began in Pakistan, and none of it can be understood in isolation from the broader strategic trajectory that led to this moment. The confrontation over the Strait of Hormuz is not new. For decades, it has represented one of the most sensitive geopolitical choke points in the world. Roughly a fifth of global oil supply passes through that narrow corridor. For Iran, it is not just a waterway, it is leverage. For the United States and its allies, it is a non-negotiable artery of the global economy. Every crisis in the Gulf region eventually returns to this same pressure point because it compresses military, economic, and political interests into a single, highly vulnerable geography. Layered on top of that is the nuclear issue, which has followed a similar pattern of escalation, negotiation, partial agreement, and breakdown for years. From earlier frameworks to more recent confrontations, the core disagreement has never been resolved. Iran views its nuclear program as a sovereign right and a deterrent. The United States views it as a proliferation risk that must be constrained. Each round of diplomacy narrows the gap temporarily, but the underlying positions remain intact. What most coverage is missing is that these two issues, Hormuz and enrichment, are not separate negotiating points. They are linked instruments of leverage. Iran uses control over maritime access and nuclear capability as bargaining chips to offset its conventional military and economic disadvantages. The United States, in turn, uses sanctions, financial restrictions, and international pressure to force concessions in both domains simultaneously. This creates a structural deadlock. Each side is being asked to give up its primary source of leverage first. The strategic logic is straightforward. From the American perspective, reopening the Strait of Hormuz immediately is essential to stabilize global energy markets and reassure allies. Allowing Iran to impose conditions or tolls on international shipping would set a precedent that Washington cannot accept. At the same time, any agreement that leaves Iran's enriched uranium stockpile intact risks undermining broader non-proliferation efforts. From the Iranian perspective, those same demands look like unilateral disarmament. Reopening Hormuz without guarantees removes one of Tehran's most powerful pressure tools. Giving up enriched uranium without irreversible sanctions, relief weakens its long-term deterrence. In that context, Iran's refusal is not simply defiance. It is a predictable outcome of its strategic calculus. This is also where economic dynamics play a decisive role. Iran is under sustained financial pressure. Sanctions have constrained its ability to access global markets, limited its currency stability, and reduced its oil revenues. That creates incentives to negotiate. But pressure alone does not determine outcomes. It interacts with political legitimacy, internal power structures, and perceptions of credibility. If Iranian leadership believes that concessions will not produce durable relief, or that agreements may be reversed, they are less likely to accept short-term economic gains at the cost of long-term strategic vulnerability. On the American side, the economic dimension is global rather than domestic. Disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz affect energy prices, shipping costs, and inflation across multiple regions. That creates urgency in Washington, but also constraints. Any agreement perceived as allowing Iran to control or tax international waters would face significant resistance, both politically and from allied nations. Overlaying all of this is an information environment that is increasingly contested. Public statements from both sides are not just reflections of negotiation positions. They are instruments of influence. When U.S. officials emphasize that failure harms Iran more, they are signaling both to domestic audiences and to Iranian decision-makers that time is not on Tehran's side. When Iranian officials accuse the United States of acting in bad faith or prioritizing other regional interests, they are shaping a narrative that justifies their refusal to concede. This informational layer matters because it affects the next phase of diplomacy. Negotiations do not occur in a vacuum. They are influenced by public expectations, alliance dynamics, and perceptions of strength or weakness. If either side is seen as conceding too much, it risks internal backlash. If it is seen as too rigid, it risks international isolation. The messaging around this breakdown is therefore as important as the substance. Meanwhile, the civilian and political consequences are often treated as secondary, but they are central to understanding the stakes. Prolonged uncertainty in the Gulf affects not just oil markets, but shipping routes, insurance costs, and global supply chains. For populations within the region, it sustains a state of low-level instability that can escalate quickly. In countries like Pakistan, which invested heavily in hosting and mediating the talks, the failure carries reputational costs and complicates already delicate regional relationships. Pakistan's role in this process is particularly revealing. By committing significant security resources and diplomatic capital, it positioned itself as a potential bridge between competing blocs. The outcome leaves it in a difficult position, balancing ties with Iran, commitments to other regional partners, and its own internal stability concerns. This underscores a broader point. Even unsuccessful negotiations reshape the strategic landscape for third parties. So what happens next? There are several plausible scenarios, none of which involve a simple return to the status quo. One possibility is that Iran quietly revisits the final offer left by the United States, calculating that limited concessions could unlock economic relief without fully surrendering leverage. Another is that a mediator, whether Pakistan or another actor, facilitates a narrower interim agreement focused on specific issues like partial reopening of Hormuz or technical nuclear constraints. A third scenario is more concerning: the continuation of the current ceasefire without progress toward a broader agreement. This creates a holding pattern in which underlying tensions remain unresolved and the risk of miscalculation persists. History suggests that such conditions are unstable. The original conflict emerged because diplomatic gaps could not be bridged. Without meaningful movement, those same gaps could widen again. This is where the long-term implications become clear. The outcome of these talks signals not just a temporary impasse, but a deeper alignment of strategic limits. Both sides have demonstrated where they are willing to stop. Future negotiations will not start from a blank slate. They will start from these established boundaries. For observers, the key indicators to watch are not just formal announcements, but incremental shifts. Changes in maritime activity around the Strait of Hormuz, adjustments in sanctions enforcement or financial channels, technical exchanges between experts on nuclear issues. These are the signals that will reveal whether the current pause evolves into progress or stagnation. In the end, this moment is less about failure than about clarity. The negotiation did not collapse under confusion. It crystallized the reality that diplomacy at this stage cannot easily reconcile the core interests of both sides. That does not mean an agreement is impossible. It means that any agreement will require a shift, either in incentives, in pressure, or in political calculations that has not yet occurred. Until then, the ceasefire holds, the negotiations linger, and the underlying tensions remain unresolved. The situation has not ended. It has simply entered a more defined and potentially more dangerous phase.